Hello, music fans, and any other kinds of fans. We are here, Daniel Montgomery with Charles Bright, to talk about the Grammy Awards that took place as we're recording this last night, Sunday night, January 28th. And on behalf of the Recording Academy, we are sorry for whatever it is you are upset about, because chances are, if you watch the Grammys, you're upset about something, and in many cases, reasonably so. Charlie, let's start with the big news of the night, the clean sweep by Bruno Mars. Not just a sweep, clean sweep. 6 nominations, 6 wins. That doesn't count the 7th win for the album for Best Engineered Album. So 7 wins for 24 Karat Magic, the album. I've listened to the album. It's pretty good. Is it 7 Grammys good? I'm not so sure about that. What did you think?
Well, it's sometimes tough to judge these things in the moment because you never know how history is going to look back on these things. But I think I can pretty confidently say that people will look back on 24 Karat Magic and say, that was a good, solid album. Maybe not, clean sweep of the general field and, all the R&B categories, going 6 for 6 or 7 for 7 if you count the engineering win. I think I honestly don't know, because, a lot of people are saying this was an upset, but you and I were both predicting 24 Karat Magic would win Album of the Year. I wanted to put it in for Record of the Year. We discussed this right after the nominations. I wanted to put it in for Record of the Year, but you and also my inclinations forced that out, and I put in Despacito, but had him in for Song of the Year. And I will say, when we saw when it won that engineering award, I was like, "Oh, this is almost, to me, I thought it was almost a done deal." There was a bit of hope earlier in the evening, and I thought maybe Kendrick might pull it off, but no, it's just it went to a very conventional. It went to a very conventional pop act. Even though, yes, in this year he was competing in the R&B categories, but it was very conventional. And I think that's one of the things that was very disappointing after going so conventional last year, rewarding Adele over Beyonce's very high concept album Lemonade. I think there was this hope that they would take the lesson, that they would take the disappointment from last year and try to turn that into, let's do something different. And with the nominations, they certainly delivered on that. Three rappers in Album of the Year, nominating Jay-Z and Kendrick Lamar in Record of the Year. They really delivered on that. But when it came to the winners, they still erred on their very safe side of things. It just happened that this happened to be done by an artist who happens to be Black. And I think the members of the Recording Academy, if they were taking away a lesson from last year, were taking away the wrong lesson from last year and viewing things in a very different circumstances than what most other people viewed the errors of last year being.
Yeah, they they looked at the nominating committee made sure to avoid what was gonna, and we saw Ed Sheeran won pop album and pop solo. If he had been in the general field, record, song, and album like we thought he would, he was winning those. Like, just looking at Bruno Mars's wins across the boards, like, there's no doubt he was winning all 3 of those if he had gotten into the general field. And they did not want that, and I understand why they didn't want that. As disappointed as Ed Sheeran might have been, I think for his career, it's better that he didn't get to be the face of that, because that's not going to be good to him. In the same way, it wasn't good to Adele, although Adele knew that and handled it very well as soon as she got up on stage and says, "I am very sorry, I'm not Beyonce. I really should be Beyonce right now." So in a way, that wouldn't have been fair to Ed Sheeran. So I think he should look back at this and say, "Thank you for putting Bruno Mars in the tough position and not me," because he's got now two extra Grammys. So, and he's like 23 years old or something. He's got time to win another dozen Grammys down the line. So Ed Sheeran will be fine. But yeah, I feel like they missed the mark. They thought, they looked at the nominations and said, job's done. And so they just went with by far the most conventional artist they could have gone with. It was the least critically admired album of the bunch. And one of the good things about the weird eligibility period the Grammys have is that, you know, we don't even have to let history judge to that great a degree, because 24 Karat Magic has had about a year and a half of time before these awards came. And we already knew from this past period that even in that period, it wasn't really revered in, you know, in any kind of way like Damn was, like 444 was, or even Melodrama by Lorde, which should certainly have at least been nominated for more categories in genre. So it's, you know, it feels like they're going out of their way to not award rap, and I feel like this is not an issue that's going to be solved until the Recording Academy feels some of that same pressure that the Motion Picture Academy felt, and, you know, starts to try and, you know, not re-engineer, but, you know, just try and open the doors a little bit to their membership, to bring more people who are more representative of you know, you know, the population at large, the entertainment community, the people who listen to music. You know, the Billboard charts look vastly different from a list of Grammy winners in any given year, which shouldn't necessarily be about popularity, but, you know, when the critics and the audience all agree that Kendrick Lamar had the album of the year, then, you know, and the Grammys just miss so wide, not just miss the mark, but they miss wide. It's a little disappointing.
It almost reminds me of how, you know, it seems like a lot of members of the Academy view animated films, documentary films, and foreign language films. You know, maybe one of them will break through into Best Picture, but they never really have a serious shot at the award. You know, because they're like, oh, we give you that one category. That's okay. You have that category. You go on and play with your Oscar now. It kind of reminds me of that. And I think the Recording Academy, though, is going to have a very serious reckoning. And the weird thing is, after that ceremony last night, I thought to myself, it kind of blows my mind that Outkast actually won. That in retrospect, in
hindsight, I have no idea how it happened. Like, I mean, like, because it wasn't a surprise when it happened, because they had a huge year. They had lots of nominations. Yeah, and it won. But like these rap albums, and not even just rap albums, but like these hip hop influenced R&B albums like Beyonce puts out, they just can't get arrested. Like even Lauryn Hill is astonishing at this point when you look at that one.
Well, the other thing about that is that it's also all the more crazy when you realize that not only did they win, but they won while competing against another rap album. Missy Elliott was nominated for that year, and that was, you know, that's usually crazy, because we usually think to ourselves, oh, well, the rap vote's going to split there, and it's so crazy that, to me, as we get further and further away from it, that they actually pulled it off. Maybe there's this whole, maybe that was, you know, the Grammys equivalent of, you know, like the argument for 12 Years a Slave was it's time. You know, I think that was maybe their equivalent of that. But now they feel, at least for the members that, you know, were voting back then, who are voting now, are like, we've already dealt with that. So we don't have to think too critically about this.
Yeah, and it's so strange to think about that the idea of vote splitting came up this year because of Jay-Z and Kendrick Lamar, and I think some people have theorized, oh, Bruno Mars probably won because of vote splitting, which I don't buy, because if there were vote splitting between Jay-Z and Kendrick Lamar, we would have seen that happen in the rap field. That was a complete blowout for Kendrick Lamar. There was no divided support in the Academy between those two. So it really just comes like they were, both Bruno Mars and Kendrick Lamar were undefeated in their categories going into the general field. And for one, it just kept going, and for one, it just ground to a complete halt.
Yeah, and that's the crazy thing. Not Bruno Mars. Kendrick Lamar. now joins this very interesting group of people that have been nominated for Album of the Year 3 times but have never won. Because this stat, at least it popped out to me last year when, before nominations, we thought that Radiohead might get in for A Moon-Shaped Pool to Album of the Year, and that would have been their 4th nomination. And no one's been nominated for Album of the Year more than 3 times and hasn't won. So, you know, we thought that that might be a factor there. But now Kendrick Lamar, if he gets back into Album of the Year, and it's quite feasible that he could, because he's very young, he's very talented. It may not be the next album he puts out, but I mean, he's still very young.
It might be the next album. He's been nominated for pretty much, like, except for that Untitled Unmastered album that he released a year or two ago. He's been up for every single thing, and
each year that he's been up, his album has been the highest rated one on Metacritic of the bunch that's been nominated for Album of the Year. Though, in all fairness to Bruno Mars, his was decently reviewed. It had a 72 on Metacritic, which is still solid.
It's respectable. I mean, yes. That's the problem with it. It's, you know, is you can't argue it. You don't look at this and think that's an embarrassing winner, but it's so, like, when you compare it to the competition, it's a very odd, questionable winner. Like, you know, it's not even his most successful album. You know, Bruno Mars's, and it's the one he's got Album of the Year for, and maybe this will be his only Album of the Year. It's like it's kind of like Meryl Streep winning for The Iron Lady.
Mm-hmm. Or it's also kind of like, you know, how the King's Speech is mainly viewed through the prism of the Oscars, and that not on its own merits, but the fact that that was a movie that beat The Social Network. You know, and it feels like for a lot of awards, it's just the nature of these awards competitions. You know, you're going to have these things that win that may not be viewed as favorably 10 years, even a year from when it happens. And so then it becomes defined by what its competition was. The problem with the Grammys, though, is that it has been way too often that they miss the mark on this. And I really hope there's some sort of reckoning and trying to figure out how can we fix this. It's a tough task to do. The Academy has, I'll say the Motion Picture Academy seems to have, to a degree, it's aligning more with where things would go much quicker than I think anyone thought it would. You know, when you see a film like Get Out get, what was it, 4 or 5 Oscar? 4?
4.
Yeah, 4 Oscar nominations, including Best Picture and Best Director. I think that's something to very much to keep in mind there. So, you know, maybe Cheryl Boone Isaacs needs to be the new president of the Recording Academy.
But it's so interesting because the Oscars, even before this initiative to increase diversity, they awarded 2 rap songs with Best Original Song before the Grammys have even awarded 1 for Record or Song of the Year. So it's weird how music is thought of as this, you know, kind of, and the Grammys in particular is this kind of younger, less stodgy kind of award and this field of music, and yet it's proven much more conservative in terms of winners.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And you know, you kind of want to see, you know, one of the things that's always been fascinating about awards is, you know, I would love to see, you know, not just, but for the Grammy specifically, I would not just like to see where things placed, you know, who got, not only who won, but who finished second, third, fourth. I would love to see the breakdown in terms of people's roles within the recording community. You know, where did the producers fall? Where did the engineers fall? Where do vocalists fall? And I think probably most interesting would be, where did the executives fall? Because they are members of the Recording Academy. And I think it would be very interesting to see where the bulk of this support is coming from.
And just to return to your thought about people who've been nominated for Album of the Year 3 times and haven't won, it's an interestingly contemporary group that are a lot they're still putting out music. So I've got your dream collaboration here for a group album. Beyonce, Lady Gaga, Kendrick Lamar, and Radiohead all collaborate on an album together. Tell me you don't want to listen to that tomorrow. like
oh God,
like instantly.
It's actually, I've been rediscovering how much I love Radiohead over the past couple of months. And I would buy that yesterday. I would be all for that. I don't know what it would be, but I think just they should call they should just call the album For Your Consideration.
And you know what? Just to smooth the ride, they can invite Adele to like be a featured artist on at least a couple of tracks.
Oh
so
yeah,
that
yeah.
Her name is on the ballot, and they'll see her and go like, oh, I don't care who else is in it. It's Adele. I'll vote for her.
Absolutely.
Now, speaking of reckonings, that's another thing that people are rightly peeved about, which is, we've talked about Grammy's race issue. Now let's talk about Grammy's gender issue. Lorde was the only female nominee for Album of the Year. There was a lot of Time's Up themes running through the show, including Kesha'S Performance. She was backed by 50 different artists, female artists, which was an incredibly powerful sight. None of them were Lorde. Maybe they could have slotted her in there. And so, you were just reading about this recently. Neil Portnow, the president of the Academy, was responding to the news that Lorde wasn't even offered a slot of her own to perform solo, even though she was one of only five Album of the Year nominees. I mean, it was her only nomination, but it's the top category of the night. And she wasn't even offered to perform solo, even though the other five male nominees did get that offer. Jay-Z turned it down, but the others took it up. What did Neil Portnow say?
Well, his first response, it was a two-part response. The first part of the response, and I will preface this by saying he should know better. But he said, well, these women artists need to step up and create content. And it's like, wow, where have you been over the past 50 years? Female artists are creating content. And I do think there's probably, vocalists have, in terms of the Grammys, when you actually look at it, vocalists, women have never really had a problem. In fact, it was 19 years ago, we had an Album of the Year lineup where the only men in it were the three male members of the band Garbage, but the rest were women because they're led by Shirley Manson, who is of course a woman. So you had an Album of the Year lineup with all female vocalists, and when it comes to engineers, mixers, producers, all sorts of the other more technical areas of recording, as I'm sure it is in film and television as well, women are vastly underrepresented. And I'm sure there's no shortage of women that want to step up. It's the issue of the opportunity of whether that's there. So it was a very tone-deaf response on his part. And also, just adding insult to injury. I think that was more Ken Ehrlich's role as the producer of the ceremony. About he offered Lorde a chance to sing "American Girl" because Lorde is not American. They are for the Tom Petty tribute, and it's like, and you want to just say to him, no, she's an Album of the Year nominee. She
has a few good songs. Yeah, she might be able to sing one of those.
Yeah, I think she could sing one of her singles. She did that 4 years ago when she was up for when she won Song of the Year in Pop Solo Performance. There's a bit of I don't want to say bitching and whining. There's groaning over Ed Sheeran winning over 4 women, which I think is just. I think it's the nature of you had 4 women and 1 guy, and as we always say, the apple in a basket of oranges. I think that's just how that, and it was one of the biggest songs of the year. I think that's just how that played out, unfortunately.
And I think they just love hits for pop solo. Like if you have the biggest hit, sometimes there is an exception where you'll have pop solo and pop album. Sometimes Kelly Clarkson will come up to win that purely for how just dynamite she is a vocalist. Even if it wasn't necessarily the biggest song or the biggest album of the year. But yeah, generally, if you have the biggest hit in that category, you'll win no matter how it's sung.
Exactly. And that's a category also that's usually dominated by female vocalists. Ever since they merged it, they merged the male and female vocal performance. So, I just think, it was a very tone deaf reaction. The second half of the statement, I can't remember the specifics of it, but it was a lot more, measured in what you would normally want to hear someone say when questioned about this.
Yeah, I have the whole. I pulled it up on.
Oh, okay. Then please.
This might just be part of it. This is quoted by Variety. It has to begin with women who have the creativity in their hearts and souls, who want to be musicians, who want to be engineers, producers, and want to be part of the industry on the executive level. They need to step up because I think they would be welcome. I don't have personal experience of those kinds of brick walls that you face, but I think it's upon us as an industry, to make the welcome mat very obvious, breeding opportunities for all people who want to be creative and paying it forward and creating the next generation of artists. The second half of that is very kumbaya.
No, the second half is what you would normally expect someone to say. Even if it's not the most dynamic thing, it's like, okay, you didn't screw up.
Yeah, the main challenge with that is on a night, this particular night, the sentence, they need to step up because I think they'd be welcome. I feel like he should have Googled Kesha and Dr. Luke before saying that. Kesha, who performed on his show, was nominated for Pop Album and Pop Solo. This idea that the only thing stopping women is the, which is implied by the sentence, by the sentiment, is their own drive to get their foot in the door, as opposed to maybe some male executive making inappropriate advances towards that foot once it gets in the door. It kind of speaks to a complete ignorance of the moment that his show was even like featured in, that was featured prominently in performances and speeches and presenters throughout the night. And it's like he hasn't noticed anything that's happened in the last 6 months.
No, it's like it's like he was watching the ceremony. It's like he wasn't even watching the ceremony and had noise canceling earphones on until it was his time to come out towards the end of the ceremony. It's just very bizarre. And it's times like, he bragged in his speech about being about how he's been president of the Recording Academy for 18 years. I usually, when it comes to things like this, I like to compare it with, okay, what's a country like that's had this sort of thing? What are countries like that have had their presidents for 18 years? They're not looked upon very favorably. I can tell you that. Robert Mugabe is not necessarily viewed as, although he is possibly paving the way for a female president if his wife takes over. So, good on you, Mugabe, for that. But other than that,
Okay, for the record, for anyone watching, I did not compare Neil Portnow to Robert Mugabe. So just so that's on.
Figuratively. Oh, we are going to get in so much trouble for this.
No, you are. I've disavowed myself of you officially now. Well, it was nice knowing you. It really was. I'm so sorry that you will be doxxed.
I gotta get my will in line before this is over.
Well, let's accentuate the positive in that I actually do think as a telecast, the show is pretty good. The performances that we did see, I would have liked to see a Lorde performance. But the performances we did see were mostly excellent. The worst I would say for any of them is maybe forgettable, a couple. But no one embarrassed themselves. No one looked bad. Most people didn't sound bad. And some were just through the roof good. What was your favorite performance? Let's try and peg it down to one, and then we'll talk.
Oh man, it's tough because I actually found myself enjoying watching the Grammys, which it's usually very off and on because it's so much more a concert than it is an award show. But this year, I really think they really struck the right balance of everything, and I found myself just loving a lot of performances. I gotta say though, it's a tie for me. Ben Platt and his amazing vocals of Somewhere. Just unbelievable. And I just love that it looked like he just walked off the street, like he just hopped on the, because he lives in New York, he just probably hopped on the subway, got off at the Garden, and just walked in with that, that T-shirt, and just was like, all right, I'm here to perform.
And it's so weird because I saw red carpet photos of him dressed to the nines. It's like,
oh really? Oh
yeah.
Okay, I never saw those.
No, he was wearing like these, like this, the suit he was wearing with like the bright, felt. I'm gonna look it up now. I can't show it to our viewers right now, but I will text it to you imminently. But go on while I do that.
But I think my other favorite was Childish Gambino. I was very surprised. And again, when I first heard Redbone after the nominations came out, I was very surprised. I was like, oh wow, this really has more of an R&B feel to it than hip hop. And again, his vocal talent was unbelievable during his performance. And I just remember watching it and just was like, wow, that caught me completely by surprise. And of course he had everybody at the time was wondering, who's that little kid who's with him? That's the kid who's playing young Simba in the new Lion King movie.
Oh, I wasn't aware of that.
Yeah, because Donald Glover's going to be playing adult Simba opposite Beyonce. And so this is his young counterpart for the movie. He brought him up there, which I think is really, really cool that he did that.
So now he and Beyonce can commiserate about both losing Best Urban Contemporary Album, even though they're nominated for Album of the Year.
Yep.
I believe they're the only two that's happened to. Although Beyonce was up against another Album of the Year nominee in that category. She lost to Girl by Pharrell Williams. Those were my two also. Ben Platt, everyone's talking about Patti LuPone. Can't say too many good things about that Patti LuPone performance, but I was actually more like blown away by Ben Platt. I think just because of expectations. I haven't seen Dear Evan Hansen. I saw his Tony's performance, but that's about all I've seen of him performance-wise. I know he can sing, but I didn't know he had that range. I did not know he had that, and not just range, but control. Like he was hitting notes so finely and so clearly, and but big. It was magnificent.
Yeah, I did get to see Dear Evan Hansen a couple months ago, and I remember reading about his regimen that he put in. He's not in the show anymore, so but it was very amazing the amount of restrictions he had to put on himself in terms of diet, what he was doing during the day when he wasn't performing. It was a very rigid regimen that he put himself through, and the range on Dear Evan Hansen, his range is fantastic. So it still was like, dude, when he was performing, I was, because also it was just so simple, and that's what I think made it really work. It's like his vocal is the star of this performance, just what was it, a piano and a double bass or something on the side. I think, and just that's it, and just him singing, and it just was perfect.
Yeah, and it was just so nice to, and that's one of those things I like about the Grammys is the diversity of music. You get to hear music as different as Terrified by Childish Gambino and A Show Tune from Ben Platt. They're both expertly sung in completely different ways. Is always so nice to see at the Grammys. It makes me want to listen and actually perform more music. It's really kind of exciting to see that. I also was very impressed by Gary Clark Jr. and John Batiste doing their tribute to Fats Domino and Chuck Berry, which was very short. Which given they spent more time paying tribute to Andrew Lloyd Webber, who was alive and well in the studio audience, than they spent on Chuck Berry and Fats Domino, who died in the past year.
And invented a whole genre of music.
Yeah, but I mean that tribute performance though, for what little we got of one, it was so outstanding. I was thinking to myself at the time, that performance is so good. I'd almost expect it to be in the premiere ceremony and not in the telecast, just because you get these, you know, these performances in the premiere ceremony that you wouldn't necessarily get to hear on a telecast because they're not necessarily marquee names or top nominees in the top categories. You know, it will be your jazz improvisational solo nominees that, you know, get to do that sort of thing. Or in this case, India Ari was also in the premiere ceremony. I thought those performances were outstanding, and I thought sometimes I want to see more like those.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I definitely thought that they were very good. Not a lot of, and I thought Kendrick Lamar just. Man, it's always so weird to see how the Grammys choose to open their ceremony, because sometimes just a performance can feel like so flat or so forced, like they're trying to, again, and we say this every year, they're trying to create the Grammy moment, you know? But
I hate that so much. And sometimes they succeed, like, but they don't succeed when they're trying to. It's like Patti LuPone. I don't think anyone, you know, Patti LuPone, she was Evita, and she's going to perform one of those songs again. I mean, I'm sure we all thought it would be lovely. You know, Patti LuPone is an amazing singer, but I don't think people thought, like, she's going to be the Grammy moment. No, they thought it was going to be the Miley Cyrus and Elton John duets, you know, which sounded good, but it wasn't a Grammy moment. I mean, in the sense, it was a Grammy moment in the sense that it was a moment that took place at the Grammys in the most literal sense. But it wasn't like a show-stopping kind of legendary moment that they wanted it to be. And I'm just like, just don't try so hard to manufacture it, and don't announce them in advance like you're about to watch history in the making, because it always makes it worse because you're expecting something greater than they can deliver, because there's a kind of magic that happens in the moment that you can't really anticipate. It's sort of like Kesha. I thought Kesha had a Grammy moment, and they were kind of trying to sell that one. But in an interesting way, her vocal wasn't all together for that performance. She had some trouble with that song, which is a very demanding song. You know, which, you know, if she even had like a light cold or something, she would struggle with that song. But it was such a powerful performance, because even though vocally she didn't have the capacity to hit every note the way that she normally would. The conviction was there. She was fighting through it in a way that was very true to that song. And the way that the female artists who were there with her, Julia Michaels, Bebe Rexha, Andra Day, Cyndi Lauper, you know, it wasn't just vocal support they were giving. In fact, you couldn't really even distinguish them from a whole crowd of people, but it was the emotional support, the solidarity of it. So that moment, and then at the end, when they all embrace in this very, very sincere moment of just, you know, shared experience and support, that was a Grammy moment.
Yeah, the optics really helped with that one.
Yeah,
and I think Kendrick Lamar also, I think, really brought it with his performance. I thought that was amazing. I thought it was just fantastic. And I'm just like, I'm just like, after that, I was just like, dude, this is why he should win Album of the Year. This is fantastic.
Yeah, there were two albums I've listened to today since the Grammys that the Grammys inspired me to listen to again. One of them was Kendrick Lamar, which lost Album of the Year, and the other one was Melodrama by Lorde, which she didn't even get to perform. So I don't know if that means the Grammys succeeded or failed. It made me listen to music that they didn't give their due.
So I'm curious, was there anything? Which performance worked the least well for you? I'll put it that way.
That's a very good diplomatic way to put it, and I think it's an accurate way to put it. There was no performance that I flat out disliked. I thought the tribute to shooting victims, Maren Morris, Eric Church, Brothers Osborne doing Tears in Heaven, I thought that was a little wobbly. Mostly because Eric Church is a fantastic singer, but sometimes singer and song just don't meet on the same wavelength, and his voice on Tears in Heaven sounded odd. Like, it did not seem to fit. I was a little...
You're more diplomatic than me on this, because I thought it was just awful. Which one was Eric Church, though? Was he the last one to sing?
He was the last one with the sunglasses. You never see his eyes.
Oh, God, no. Because when I first heard them play the guitar, I'm like, okay, Tears in Heaven. I know this song. I know what this is going to be. But I just thought the vocals and the attitude did not work. And I was just like it wasn't horrible. Like, it wasn't like jaw on the floor awful. But I still was just like, oh, this is not working. This is not working. I just wish I could have been in that control room going, yeah, just cut it. Go to the next bit.
Quick, someone page Lorde. We need an emergency performer. The other one I didn't think worked for me, and it was weird that it was in the show because they didn't nominate it for anything, which was Wild Thoughts. I thought that was a weird performance. I didn't think it was that well performed on the stage. I mean,
that was the DJ Khaled performance.
DJ Khaled, Rihanna, and Bryson Tiller. And Rihanna has, like, her stage presence is, second to none. No complaints about that. She has such great performative energy up there, but just the vocals weren't that stellar on any of them. The staging of it felt very overdone to an extent. And the fact that the song wasn't nominated for anything, it felt like, okay, well, there were a bunch of songs that were nominated that could have been performed. So it just seemed, they could have performed. They could have brought Rihanna to perform "Loyalty" with Kendrick Lamar and put that into the medley at the opening of the show. Because she actually won for that. So that was weird to me. U2 was fine, but I would say that's about it. It's the kind of performance that would win Record of the Year next year from this Academy.
We're diverse. We reward Irish people.
And I love Sting, and I think the idea of him collaborating with Shaggy is weird in a way that I find very interesting and very exciting. But I don't think their performance was necessarily the most necessary or the most impressive of the night in terms of, it's like, okay, well, why this song? Why this year? Why now? Like, what does this say about music right now?
Well, I think it was more. I think it was more just because his song was An Englishman in New York. And so I think it was just like that. Because remember, every presenter who came out to a New York themed song. And so I think that was just celebrating the New York thing. But also the weird thing about that is all it made me think of was, I think it was, 13, 14 years ago when Sting performed with Sean Paul at the Grammys, and I was just like, this just seems like a rehash of that. It's nothing there's nothing particularly new there to do with that.
I loved in your forums roundup, you collected all the reactions from our forums, and you got out alive, which is amazing. And I love that someone in there was actually mad that Sting was bragging about his legal immigration status. We had a comment in our forums that said it's really insensitive for Sting to sing this song with the lyrics, I'm a legal alien. And, that was, for shame or something like that. And I'm like thinking, okay, that's a stretch in terms of an outrage. It's like we said, we're all outraged about something at this year's Grammys, and not all outrages are created equal. I very much felt that was a line in this context. It felt more like solidarity with immigrants than like, haha, I have a green card and you don't. Unless that was in that was the bridge that he cut from the song for time. But yeah, I have no issues with Sting's immigration status or his particular lyric about said status.
Yeah, that was one comment where I saw that there. I'm like, oh, that is going in the best of mix. No matter what your feelings are about it, you just got to go with that. I was also very the one comment that I loved, and I put this in the headline of the article, was that Donald Glover made someone pregnant with that performance. I thought that was great.
Yeah, that was delightful.
Yeah. Another
and I was glad
I
to hear that because the editors go back and forth. Marcus was not a big fan of that vocal, and I was like, "Who broke your ears as a child?" So I'm glad it wasn't just me who loved that song and that performance. So yeah, he'll see a doctor soon about the tinnitus or whatever is happening in there.
No, the Washington Post, my hometown paper, did a great wrap up. They ranked all the performances. They actually ranked Ben Platt and Patti LuPone towards the bottom because they said it was so simple. And I'm like, oh God, Washington Post, you are missing the point here.
Did the Washington Post vote for the winners this year? Because
they actually had an interesting article on Saturday or Sunday, basically where they looked at, I think like the past 20, 30 years of album of the year and put in, what they think should have won and should have been nominated. And some of those decisions I think were really good. I applaud them for saying that Kid A by Radiohead should have won in 2000. That was a very courageous stance of them. And also that homogenic...
Isn't it a courageous stance for music critics to say Radiohead is good?
Do not rob me of this. And also that Homogenic by Bjork should have won in 1997. It should have been nominated and won. But it's a very fascinating article that they wrote. And they actually give hip-hop its due quite a bit in that article. But I think Childish Gambino's performance was ranked number 4 of the main performances. They didn't rank any of the tributes or Logic's performance because they felt like it was too serious and they don't want to bring it to that level of critiquing it, I guess. Which was another great performance, I thought. I was very surprised by that. I thought, because usually like when someone makes a statement at the end of a performance, usually I'm just like, okay, I've heard this all before. I'm just let's get to the next thing. The
megaphone was
because I couldn't understand what he was saying.
I understood it, and I've since forgotten it because it's one of those. He said one of those things that sounds profound in the moment, but it really is just kind of collapses when you actually try and think about what it means. Logic was direct, to the point, eloquent. I thought Logic had the right logic.
And I gotta give a shout out to DMV guy. Logic is from Gaithersburg, Maryland, Montgomery County, right to the north of me. So, DMV represent.
Yeah, what did you think about James Corden, his performance?
Much better than last year. I think last year was way too forced and way too performance-based. And I think in a show that is about music performances, his opening performance is just like taking time away from other people or other awards they could be presenting. I thought that the subway karaoke thing, I think it was funny. I just think it should have been shorter.
Yeah,
I think it just went on. I think it went on too long, but I loved the gag though. I loved the gag of them trying to do that, and all the New Yorkers are like, "Shut the fuck up! We're trying to get it back from work."
and that is so that's not a new observation of New Yorkers, but I felt like it was so pitch perfect. I have been on subway trains with people performing, and I love the moment where it's like, "I'm sorry, I don't have any money." They don't even recognize them. It's like it's so true to the city. There's we're not starstruck. We are we're jaded, but in a good way. It's like you're
just trying to get somewhere. That's all.
Just trying to get somewhere. It's like it's been a long day. It's like Mr. Sumner, please, can we do this another time?
Yeah, exactly. And I love how it didn't make New Yorkers look bad in the whole thing. It's just like hey, we're just trying to go to work, come home from work, and just relax. You are not helping.
Yeah, that's one good thing about James Corden is that his humor in circumstances like that is always aims for the self-deprecation rather than to make fun of whoever he's with and whoever's around him. I felt like he was very much the butt of that joke. Him and Sting and Shaggy. That was well appreciated. I always like that kind of humor because there's a humility to it.
Yeah, I definitely and I'm with you on that one. And I thought the Fire and Fury bit was perfect. It just hit every note perfectly. I have to say my personal favorite was either Cardi B or DJ Khaled.
DJ Khaled was me. That was DJ Khaled's performance in that sketch was better than his performance during Wild Thoughts. It was so funny. He so nailed his own persona in terms of parodying himself. It was so perfect. That was just perfect.
Oh yeah, no, that was perfect.
And Hillary was there too.
Yeah, Hillary was there too, and I know that's what most people are talking about. And it was a good gag too. Yeah.
Although, as we awards nerds know, we're thinking about that audiobook and thinking, no, none of these people, give it to Helen Mirren or Jessica Lange. They're too close. They need this.
Yes. Oh God, yes. Helen Mirren and Jessica Lange should read that audiobook. No, here's how it should be. Helen Mirren reads the regular part of the book, but any quotes by Trump, Jessica Lange.
Oh, but now I'm thinking Frances McDormand is also knocking on that same door. I feel like Frances McDormand would do a good Trump.
She could. But for some reason, I feel like Jessica Lange would just bring the bitchiness to it. I just think she would bring it so well.
Indeed. I actually wouldn't be surprised if we see a Fire and Fury audiobook at some point. And that's very exciting to think about now. And honestly, we should open up a consulting firm for Grammy-less EGOT pursuers who just need an audiobook. It's like we are agents, but for just that one tiny corner of the recording business of booking people audiobooks so that they can win EGOT.
Yep, that sounds like I'm with you on that one. You do the work, I'll be the face.
and we'll split the proceeds 100-0.
Yeah. No, I can get behind that. I just want the glory.
You just sit there and look pretty.
It's what I do best.
So any closing thoughts about this year's Grammys? We've gotten through the racism, the sexism, and I'm sure some good performances.
And some of them I assume are good. No other. I think, I wish, Kendrick had gotten his due. It really makes me worry about, if he gets nominated again, because sometimes they'll just, at that point, they'll just like skirt around you to try to just, avoid any awkwardness. But I also think the Grammys need to take a look at the way that they decide things. They have one of the strangest nomination systems that any awards body has, and so I really hope that maybe this will be the catalyst for the organization saying, you know what, we need to revisit something. We don't need to say that we need to reward diversity for the sake of diversity, but things do need to be more reflective of where things are. And I think that's something that gets lost here. Hip hop and rap music is, at the cultural center, has been at the cultural center of, our music for, the past, more than 25 years, but it's really, been the chart topping thing. It's been for like 25 years. It's been around for even longer, which is
increasingly so. Like today, the day after the Grammys snubbed rap in the general field, Drake was the first person to debut at #1 on the Billboard Hot 100 in ages. Mm-hmm. I can't remember if Ed Sheeran did that with "Shape of You," but it's been at least a year since someone has done that, and we know it's not going to be up at the Grammys next year because Drake is tired of that. So
yeah, and it's just it's something that how was I going to phrase this? It's so amazing considering when rap first was, coming onto the scene, coming onto a more mainstream scene in the mid 80s, a lot of people, a lot of music people, the stuffing music executives thought that this would be just another fad and it would last about as long as disco did. But it has proved itself as a staying genre, as a solid genre that should command respect as much as rock and roll, R&B, country, folk music, anything like that. So I think there needs to be some real soul searching done at the Grammys. But at the least, I will say congratulations, Bruno Mars, because we called that one.
Yeah, well, so I would congratulate us more than Bruno Mars. No, I'm sure Bruno Mars did, technically record the album, but I really think it's more, our doing than his.
Fair enough.
Well, with that, thank you, Charles, for joining me today and tonight, and certainly we'll have a lot to talk about at next year's Grammys and at the VMAs coming up this summer, and even the Academy of Country Music Awards coming up this spring, in case you are inclined to dive back into Eric Church.
The Academy of what is who?
Well, with our music expert, ladies and gentlemen. With that, thank you very much, and we will all see you all soon.